And oh, what an axe for the axe cars at Beach Ridge Motor Speedway to the wire. And the Midgets become the star at Star Speedway. As another race facility right here in the heart of the Northeast is about to open. Hello, I'm Ben Dodge, and I welcome you to yet another edition of Raceweek. Well, in this edition of Raceweek, we're coming to you from the high banks of Monadnock Motor Raceway, which is located in Winchester, New Hampshire. The competition is about to begin for the 1991 season. But that's not all, because in this edition of Raceweek, we'll be taking a look at the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour from the Martinsville Speedway. We'll also be taking a look as the excitement continues a lot further north to the Star Speedway for a look at Super Modified competition. Besides that, we'll be at Beach Ridge Motor Speedway and take a look at the Coors Act Tour. And of course, one of our favorite stops, the Riverside Park Speedway in Agawam, Massachusetts. So now it's time to get geared up for the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour from the Martinsville Speedway. With a purse in excess of $48,000, the Haynes 150 was about to go the distance. Now, these cars didn't even take time trial due to weather condition. Fact is, NASCAR shuffled the deck a bit just before the start of the event. And when the field went to green, it was Mighty Mike Stefanik, leader in the point parade, starting right up front of the competition. Doug Hebron was starting in the outside row. Then it was Ricky Fuller and the Reg making up row number 2. Once under green, Stefanik wasted no time at all to try to set the pace. Then Doug Hebron fought back and took back the lead for a short while. Ricky Fuller and Reggie Ruggiero were into the hunt as 4 cars would bid for the lead. One would bobble, and that would be Hebron in the outside groove. Not far behind was Jan Leedy and a host of others trying to contend and work their way to the front. Suddenly, it was Carl Pastriak who get out of shape, making contact with the defending Tour champion, Jamie the Jet Tomeno. Tomeno would come back around and slam the wall with the front of the car. Then the pack of cars, through the dust and the smoke, would try to squeak by. Billy Middleton would make contact with the back end of Tomeno's car, forcing Tomeno to head to the pits. Middleton was out for the day. When the field went back to green, it was Mighty Mike Stefanik in command. Ricky Fuller would dive to the inside, and Leedy was right in the thick of things, as Hebron would bobble in the outside, and this would cost him 3 positions on the racetrack. Further back in the competition, another mix-up would occur. Richie Gallup would make contact, and Jeff Fuller, the man that knows the Martinsville Speedway so well, would be involved and go around with car number 8. While that was all happening, Jan Leedy, who was contending right up front in the competition along with the Reg, would suddenly have a problem. Leedy was out for the afternoon. Mighty Mike Stefanik was still in command of the field at the front of the pack. And the Reg was starting to reel in on Ricky Fuller. George Kemp was also a factor, but time was starting to run out. Closing lap of competition, guess who? The man that led from start to finish, it was Mike Stefanik. Ricky Fuller to finish in second over Reggie Ruggiero, George Kemp, and Doug Hebron. And Tommy Bowles would cross the finish line backwards. Well, it was green to checker for Mike Stefanik, and it looked like another championship season for Mighty Mike. Well, now it's time to go back and take a look at the competition from the Riverside Park Speedway. Well, we're going to go back and take a look at the event that we weren't able to show you last week. And we'll also show you round number 2, the Twin 60s from the Riverside Park Speedway in Agawam, Mass. The competition has never been better at the Riverside Park Speedway. On April 20th, Saturday night, it was a fine example of just that. Ricky Fuller, right from the start, by luck of the draw, would immediately start to pull away. But in the front pack of cars, it was the Reg who was coming to the front of the field with ease. Ruggiero had worked his way down underneath Ed Kennedy to work his way among the top 4 cars, when Kennedy would get crossed up and spin towards the center of the infield. He'd lose some valuable time on the racetrack, but back towards the front of the field, to the outside of Bruce D'Alessandro, it was Ruggiero to pick up position number 2. Dan Avery was not far behind, and Ricky Fuller was in command. Stan Greger was now among the top 5 cars and starting to reel them in. And Kirby Monteith would cut a tire on the left side of car number 85. He would quickly head back to the pit area. But while the field was under caution, there was no question about it that the Reg and Ricky Fuller Fuller were talking about more than just space on the racetrack and who would get the jump on the restart. Once back to green, it was Fuller with the McBeth-powered race car that would look strong for a while. Then the Reds wouldn't still give up with ease. He'd have to settle for second. But second just wasn't good enough. As those two cars would dice it up for the number 1 and 2 spots, it was Dan Avery and Stan Greger who was battling for position 3 and 4. Lap after lap, but time was running out, and it was a race to the wire. But no doubt about it, it would be Ricky Fuller who would try to hold on in the closing laps of this event. But still, the story would be told at the start-finish line, and only one car could set in the winner's circle. That car, by inches, would be Ricky Fuller over Reggie Ruggiero. Stan Greger would finish in third, Dan Avery a great run for fourth, and George Rodinas to round out the top 5.
It was a lot of fun. You know, it's good to be able to put on a good show for the fans, and I wasn't worried at all about Reggie getting into me. You know, he's a good, top-notch, respectable driver, and I knew that he wouldn't take any real estate away.
On the restarts, when you guys are going down the back straightaway, is there a psychological game going on between the two of you? It seems that way with you, kind of weaving back and forth, not trying to let him catch you off guard.
Well, the idea is to try and not be overly predictable, and I wanted to start on the bottom, and the 44 team seems to think they have a democracy here, so they all voted on the radio and made me start up top, so I had to do something, so I had to catch him off guard.
I'm sure he knows that we're on the bottom. He took the outside. He took the inside in the first when they gave the crossover flag, and his ears were probably ringing because the guys on the other end of the radio must have been screaming at him not to let me take the outside. So he finally took the outside, and of course that's the faster way around here. So maybe he's smartened up.
Did it bother you at all? He's weaving back and forth, going down the back straightaway, and you just seem to hold your ground. But he was definitely trying to catch you off guard.
Nah, he's has to wake up a little bit earlier in the morning. I probably have more laps here at Riverside than he has in his career, so he'll get better eventually.
25 circuits in the record books, and the Pro Stock put on just as impressive of a show. Here's Mark Perino dominate the racing action up front. But Blaine Bells would try to give him a run for the money with car number 97. Then Tony Papali and Mike Duquette would do a little shuffling of their own to get to the front of the field. They were contending among the top 5 cars, and Dave Caruso wasn't far behind. Eddie Carroll was also a factor when Tommy Fern would start to reel in for position number 1. Fern had closed up the impressive gap, but time had run out, and Perino would set in the winner's circle. Fern had finished in second over Blaine Bells, Tony Papali, and Dave Caruso. Late model main event, Teddy Chalmers and Gary Fermani were trying to make it 3 wide when Chris Benson Woods became a target and would do a pirouette of spins with car number 2X. That would send things shuffled around and a bumper on the racetrack. But back towards the front of the field, there was a different type of bumping going on as Mike Quintiliano would try the inside of Barry Gray. Pretty much evenly matched. Gray was looking for his second win, and there was another battle going on, this time between Roger Charette and Martin Leary. And Leary literally misjudged and literally slammed the wall at a ton, damaging the right side of car number 11, ending his hopes of securing his first victory of the 1991 season. Back to the front of the field looking for win number 2. Guess who? It was car number 29 for Barry Gray. Mike Quintiliano would finish in second over Fred LaForge, Gary Fermani, and Darren Ferrante. A picture-perfect setting for this week's Twin 60s for the Budweiser competition at Riverside Park Speedway. Bobby G and Wade Cole making up the front row. Chris Kopech and Eddie Spires in row number 2. Brian Schofield and Brad Itella. As the field would go to green, 60 laps and extra bucks were on the line in this big event. Suddenly, right from the start, Stan Greger would have a problem before one lap would get in the record book. And then there'd be another problem. Down the back straightaway, Ricky Fuller would make some heavy contact. Off the turn, Brad Itella would go around. Victims of this would become Reggie Ruggiero, Larry Moore, Kirby Monteith, and Brian Schofield. The Reg's car showed some minor damage to the sheet metal in the back end of the car, and the Reg was forced to head to the pit area. But when they were back to green, it was Bruce D'Alessandro, former track champion, to challenge for position number 2. Wade Cole was running the outside with car number 33, where D'Alessandro would try to pick up the spot. Bobby G was still in command out in front. Contact was made. Wade Cole would drift up a bit, and Dan Avery and Charlie Pastriak were factors. All of a sudden, something weird happened to Marty Radwick as he literally slammed car number 28. Greger's car and Radwick's car were severely damaged. Bobby G, the leader, would pit under this caution. Back to green, it was Bruce D'Alessandro in command, and Ricky Fuller, who had come from the back of the pack and had come from a flight back from Martinsville, was now the man running in the number 2 spot. Different automobile, out of shape, coming off the turn. Down the front straightaway, Pastriak was on the outside. Suddenly, Rick Fuller would drift up, contact was made, and Charlie Pastriak was literally almost sent out of the ballpark. Over-aggressiveness was definitely the story. But Dick Brooks, the NASCAR chief steward, he had only one thing to say to Ricky Fuller: "You're out of this one for the night." But when the field went back to green, there was still a good battle shaping up for the lead. While the Reg was in command of the competition, it was car number 9, Bruce D'Alessandro, that was holding off Dan Avery. With less than 5 laps to go, the Reg would cut a tire. Car number 11 would be sent to the pit area. It almost looked like he was a shoo-in for the easy victory. But back when the field was under green, there was a battle for the lead. Car number 9 or car number 10. Avery was on the inside and D'Alessandro on the outside. The mistake was made, and Avery now had taken over position number 1. He would hold on and take down his first victory of the 1991 season. Bruce D'Alessandro would finish in second over Brad Hightower, John Zavisa, and Ed Kennedy. Pro Stock main event. This event would be the distance of 30 laps. Ed Carroll, the man who owns the Riverside Park Speedway, would be starting right up front. Wayne Carroll would be running in the number 2 spot with Brian Grundon challenging to the inside. It was Dave Caruso and Tom Carey also looking like factors when they were 3 wide off the turn. Caruso would take the low road, Carey looking for the high road, and Grundon would pull it back into line. Then it was Dave Caruso to take over the number 1 spot. Ed Carroll would be forced to drop back to second. Lou Fryer was now considered a major factor, and Tom Fern was not far behind with car number 92. Time was starting to run out of the competition here, and what a great battle for the top 3 positions. It was Tommy Fern to work his way down low when Ed Carroll would get crossed up, come back across the racetrack, and make contact with Tommy Fern with car number 92. This would send the cars both high and low in the racetrack and tighten things up for the remainder of the competition. But once back to green, it was Dave Caruso in command, and for this team, it would be their first victory in 1991. It was Lou Fryer to finish in second. Tom Carey Jr. was third. Fourth was Eddie Carroll, and fifth was Mike Duquette. The late model main event was an extra distance event, 60 laps of competition. Gary Fermani wasted no time at all as he set the pace at the front of the field. Heavy hitters in the competition were already starting to thread the needle, and once back at the front of the pack, it was Roger Charette with the Roger Rabbit machine to move to the inside. The 1991 Lumina was on a roll. It had inched its way out in front and had taken over the lead. But Roger Charette would hold on and take down the victory. Gary Fermani was second over Rocco Montiano, Mike Vigliano, and Rich Bassett.
Wild is just one word that best describes the run at Riverside Park Speedway. What an exciting evening of competition. Well, now it's time to take our first commercial break, and when we come back, we'll be taking a look at the midgets at the Star Speedway, the Super Modifieds, and the excitement of the Coors Actor from Beach Ridge Motor Speedway. All of that and more right after this. More racing competition, this time as we'll be heading to the Star Speedway in Epping, New Hampshire. Now, they'll be hosting the excitement of open-wheel racing at its best, the Super Modifieds and the excitement of the midgets from Star Speedway.
On April 20th, the Star Speedway opened up with a 35-lapper for the Super Modifieds. It was the number 11 of Nate Botwell who quickly jumped out into an early lead. Last year, that car was driven by Larry Recker. And the 27 of Russ Wood, he was right there as a contender, too, throughout the event. The 77 of Dave Samard moved into the top 5 when there was trouble in front of him. The 88 of Scott Heil would spin, and the 51 of Joe Moriarty would make contact with the 23 of Douglas. Mike Douglas' car would erupt in flames as an oil line would break on car number 23. Douglas was able to get out of the car unhurt. On the restart, it was Botwell back in command with car number 11. The 07 of Jim Lowry, last year's track champion, moved into second. But more troubles down the back straight as one car would lose an engine. Sending oil all over the track, Joe Moriarty had nowhere to go. He hit the oil and slammed the wall in turns 3 and 4. This would bring out a red flag situation, and Joe Moriarty in the 51 would be okay. Back to green, it was the 11 of Nate Botwell of Pelham, New Hampshire, who held off the challenges of Dave Samard right down to the wire. It was Botwell in for the win, Dave Samard in for second, Jim Lowry was third, Howie Lane was fourth, and Scott Heil managed to finish fifth. Hey, Nate, what a great way to start 1991. Well, next up were the Pro Stocks, a 30-lapper for them, and it was Norm Wren, car number 1, who quickly jumped out into an early lead. Brett Rollins, driving car number 12, was in the second spot. But the big battle was for fifth. Down the back straightaway, Bob Cabral in the 66 and Mike Belfiore in the 90. Out of the picture, the two would touch. Cabral would spin down low. Belfiore would be stuck in the middle as the field would manage to scramble by. On the restart, it's Wren on the inside with the 1. M3 of Mike Murphy on the outside. Murphy bobbles just a bit, and the 12 of Brett Rollins manages to squeak in to position number 2. The 7 of Eric Hudson comes down low underneath Murphy. But out in front, it's Norm Wren, who's led all the laps in the Pro Stock opener. Down to the line, it's Norm Wren to take down the win. Eric Hudson in for second, over Babe Branscombe in third. Phil Burrell in the fourth spot, and Pete Biandaca to round out the top 5. Here's Chris Romano with the Midgets.
The drivers' meeting has just concluded, and in a few moments we will be taking to the track for the heat races for the opening guns of the 1991 Northeastern Midget Association FM LaRusso Tour. In heat race action, it was the Seymour brothers opening up the season, with Mike Seymour taking the first heat win in a late race pass of Jim Miller in the number 12. Bobby Seymour executed another late race textbook pass of Russ Storr to bring his car into victory circle as well. We're here at the start-finish line of Star Speedway for the opening round of the NEMA SM LaRusso & Sons Midget Tour. Tonight, the Jerry Dolliver Memorial. Right now, the cars are lining up behind me, and we had a chance to talk to tonight's pole sitter, Doug Cleveland. Describe the transition, if you will, for the viewers. For the last probably 10 years or so, you've raced in a Badger-type offset machine, fielded by Paul Cleveland. Now you're hooked up with the Curry organization. You're back in an upright for the first time in quite some time. Tell us the difference in getting used to the different styles.
It's like driving a go-kart compared to a Mack truck.
Which is the Mack truck?
It's quite different. It seems like you're sitting way up. You know, it's a whole different perspective of the track, but it's fun.
Leading the cars down to the feature were Doug Cleveland and Harry Johnson. It was Cleveland and the number 12 car of Jim Miller dicing at the front for the first lap, but the field was put under caution almost immediately as Lee Smith, who had taken over the number 17 of Phil Marcy, spun in the backstretch. On the restart, Miller was able to capitalize on his second row starting position and go to the front, where he stayed for several laps until finally taken over by a very hard-charging Joey Coy. Behind those two, it was a dogfight between Russ Storr, the Seymour brothers, and Drew Finoro. Coy was able to extend his lead, but Russ Storr was catching up with each passing lap. On lap number 18, the number 16 of Matt O'Brien spun in turn 4, bringing out the yellow and bunching the cars for a restart. Prior to that, Mike Seymour, the number 8, was really on the move, and he had gotten up to second place at that point. After one false start, the field went green again. Mike Seymour fell to third again after being passed by Russ Storr, but out front it was all Joey Coy, the 1989 NEMA champion, kicking off 1991 in style by taking the win. Russ Storr was able to hold on to second. Mike Seymour a very fast third. Drew Finoro was consistent in fourth. Bobby Seymour was fighting a skipping engine in fifth. We are here with the winner of the opening round of the 1991 SM LaRusso & Sons NEMA Tour, Joey Coy. Joey, fantastic victory with a lot of pressure from behind you. Describe the race for us.
So I knew that Seymour was there the last half of the race, and he's a good competitor. He kept trying to come up the outside, and it was just a little too slick for him, I guess. It was a real good race, tough.
Were you worried at all about that restart with 8 laps to go?
No, it made me cool my tires off, made the car handle better the last 8 laps.
Let me ask you this. Did you expect the car to be this good right out of the box, first race of the season?
Yes, I have a good crew. I expect it all the time.
Very good. Congratulations. We'll look for you next week at Lee.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that every race that I win this year is dedicated to my 15-year-old daughter, Tracy, who lost her life in February. Thank you.
Round number 2 of the 1991 NEMA SM LaRusso Tour takes place this Sunday at Lee USA Speedway, and Raceweek will have all the action for you from there. For Raceweek, I'm Chris Romano.
Thanks, Chris. Well, there was also another major event, Ron, in the northeastern region of the country. It was at the Oxford Plains Speedway in Oxford Plains, Maine. Now, this was the second stop for the Busch Grand National North Circuit. And Ricky Craven was the star of the show once again. In the Diet Coke 100, following Craven to the line was Kelly Moore. Finishing in the third spot was Dale Shaw. Dave Dion would finish in the fourth spot, and Mike Rowe would round out the top 5. Well, it's once again time to take another commercial break, and when we come back, we'll be taking a look at the excitement in the competition right here from Monadnock Motor Raceway. We'll also bring you more great racing action from the Axe Tour Tour from Deep Ridge Motor Speedway. So stay tuned, because we'll be back with more of the best in motorsport. I've been right here from Monadnock Motor Raceway. This is the start of the 20th season of competition. Let's take a look at the best from the high banks of Monadnock Motor Raceway. It was a picture-perfect afternoon for any day of competition. But what a great day for an opener. 50 laps was the distance for the NASCAR Modifieds at Monadnock Motor Raceway. And the competition looked very, very impressive right from the start of the main event. It was Brian Schofield on the inside of Dunk Rudolph as the field went to green. Ted Brown would quickly sneak into position number 2, and Ricky Fuller was already in the 3rd spot. Dwight Jarvis was trying to get hitched up on the outside. His Ed Kennedy would go down low, but the battle was now for the lead. Schofield on the outside with Ricky Fuller on the inside. When Beth Power would decide who got position number 1, it was Ricky Fuller in command. Schofield would drop back to 2nd. Further back in the pack, it was Richie Gallup who was dicing it up with Dwight Jarvis, the hot shoe from the Claremont Speedway. And Schofield would spin with a little bit of help off turn number 4. With 5 laps to go, Gallup was working his way to the front of the field. Then suddenly Ted Brown would appear to have a throttle stick in the car. He would slam a light pole on the outside of the racetrack. This would bring a red checker situation, and Ricky Fuller would take down the victory. Kirby Monteith, a great run for 2nd over Dwight Jarvis, Richie Gallup, and Jerry Marquis. 50 laps was the story in the pro stocks, and right from the start, Gigi Gravel would look like a strong contender in the competition here. He'd set the pace when suddenly Funky Karen with a brand new number and a brand new deal would take over the lead with car number 88. Not far behind was Rob Goodenough, and he looked very, very strong, and John Lobo Jr. would go to the outside. Factor number 4 becomes car number 28X for Dave Caruso. Then it was Rob Goodenough to try to stay glued to the bumper of Gigi Gravel as Gravel would take back position number 1. Funky Karen was hung out to dry on the outside with car number 88. It was still a good battle shaping up at the front of the pack, no question about it. Suddenly the battle for 2nd became a 3-car challenge for the lead. Brett Rollins with some help from Funky Karen. As Karen would go to the infield, Rollins would get away, but a flat right rear tire would tell the story for him. And Jim McCallum, who looked like he was having a tough day, would spin for the 2nd time. But Funky Karen's car looked like it had been through World War III instead of World War II. Well, when it was back to green, back at the front of the field, it was Rob Goodenough who was looking for his first victory of the season. He was setting the pace on the outside. Gigi Gravel was forced to settle for 2nd, and Caruso was now a major contender in position number 3. Slicing and dicing down the back straightaway, Raymond was now on the inside. Jeff Zeidema was there when suddenly Gigi Gravel would spin. Lobo would go to the outside. Brett Rollins would make heavy contact. Raymond would spin down low, and Jim McCallum would somehow manage to sweep through. Back up to green, Zeidema was looking good to the outside. When suddenly a mix-up would occur, Lobo would get away. Another caution in the competition. Then it was Jerry Marquis who was reeling in on Rob Goodenough. Time was starting to run out. Marquis is the defending champion. He'll make a last lap bid for it, but it would be Rob Goodenough to take down the victory. Jerry Marquis in for 2nd. Jim Boniface has got 3 over Jim McCallum and Roger Raymond. Late model main event, no question about it. Ed Stones would get out into an early lead, but in the closing laps, Barry Gray would reel him in. Time was starting to run out, a race to the wire. It was Stone who was trying to desperately hold on. He would by inches over Barry Gray to finish in 2nd. Tom Stone was 3rd. Bill Bry and Eddie Brio to round out the top 5.
Just as we anticipated, the action was fast and furious from the high banks of Monadnock. Next week, we'll bring you more great racing action from here as well. Well, now it's time to move further north for stop number 2. Now, remember, the Coors Actor was rained out from St. Air Super Speedway. So the next stop was the Beach Ridge Motor Speedway in Scarborough, Maine.
$41,000 was the main attraction here, and what an attraction for the Coca-Cola 100. The capacity crowd came out, and they were bundled up to see some of the most heated competition that the state of Maine has ever seen before. It was Kevin LePage who looked strong right from the start in the competition. Phil Pinkham, one of the hometown boys, would try to give him a run for the money for a while. But there was no question about it. It didn't take long for Dave Dion to work his way to the front of the pack. By lap number 6, he was the man in command of the competition. And literally at one point started to string it out when suddenly Bobby Randall with car number 91 would reel in. Representing the hometown favorites, he was definitely a factor and a contender. Robbie Crouch wasn't too far behind either as he was starting to thread the needle. Then just in front of the leaders, a problem would develop. Carlton Roby would go spinning. Dave Dion would squeak by, but Bobby Randall was out of the loose stuff, almost out of the ballpark. He would come back into line but lose a little bit of ground on the racetrack. When the field would go back to green, it was Beaver Dragon who'd take command of things at the front of this pack. Once Dragon was into the lead, he'd start to string it out just a bit. Another factor involved in the competition was Dion, of course, once again. But with less than one circuit to go, Dion made it look so easy. He'd move to the outside of Dragon down the back straightaway. It was already too close to call, but there was still more than half the track to return back to the start-finish line. What was it going to be? By inches, it was Dave Dion. Securing the runner-up spot was Beaver Dragon. Bobby Randall was third, Paul Johnson was fourth, and Buzzy Vasanson would finish in the fifth spot.
I really didn't think there was any hope. Beaver started pulling away. He covered the bottom of the racetrack, and I had done that for 90-something laps, and it worked fine for me. But I guess with maybe a lap or two to go, then everybody goes in with a little bit of a defensive type driving, and Beaver says, I'll stay low, I'll keep the car stable, and he gave me the room, he gave me the shot, and I didn't think I could pull it off, and I don't think he did either, and I think he kind of overpowered his tires off the last turn, like you said, and he had me beat up until then, and then when you got the lead, you tend to overpower more than when you don't have it. Trying to hang on to the lead is a more nerve-wracking situation than just trying to take the lead. Because if you don't get it, people say, well, you know, you gave it a good shot. But if you lose it, you're a real numbhead. So.
Well, we're out of time, but we managed to bring you a lot of great racing action for this edition of Race Week. Next week, we'll be right back here at Monadnock Motor Raceway, the Riverside Park Speedway, and Lee, USA. Take care. Bye-bye now.